Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is going to be an informal session. I'm going to discuss academic publishing in general, and I'm going to give you a little bit of specifics about publishing with Intellect more specifically. The idea is to kind of demythologize some of the things associated with publishing, because it's kind of a bit of a scary world, or at least people think it is, but it's not all that bad, honest. Basically, it's going to be informal, but it will be in some rough sections. And I plan to discuss certain things, including choosing the right publisher or publication for your research, submitting an article to a journal, and the book proposal process. It's like I said, it's going to be in rough sections. So if you do have questions or if anything doesn't make sense, just use the chat function and I will check on it regularly. But we'll also make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A as well. To begin with, who am I? So my name is James Campbell, and I oversee international marketing and acquisitions for Intellect Books and Journals. I'm based in New York, and I've drawn the short straw today. So apologies for my unprofessional bedroom background, as I live with a few other people. And also, I think they're doing roadworks outside. So if there's any loud noises or general kerfuffle, please excuse that too. Okay. So I've worked in publishing for 13 years. I've had many different roles. I started as a production assistant. I've been an acquisitions editor. I've been a marketing director. So I've worked in all different aspects of the industry. So I can answer a lot of different questions related to different things. If you guys want to just, if you have any specifics. Academically speaking, I've got an MA in English Studies, so I have also been an academic myself to some degree anyway. And in my role, I attend a lot of conferences and a lot of different academic events which take place all over the world, but particularly here in North America. I regularly discuss publishing opportunities with prospective authors. So I'm used to fielding questions about publishing. So again, anything that crosses your mind, you can reach out to me today during this conversation, during this workshop, or feel free to email me with any of your publishing related questions after the session or in the future. So if you did want to email me, you can reach me at james@intellectbooks.com. I will stick that in the chat before the end. Okay, so I'll just drop you a little bit of information here about Intellect, because we're basically an independent academic publisher, and we focus on scholarly books and journals. We've been a commercial publisher for around 35 years, and our focus is generally on research, but across the arts and humanities. So we don't publish in the sciences, we don't publish fiction or poetry. We focus specifically on academic research. Much of what we focus on as well is new, emerging, it's cutting edge. A lot of it relates to business and society too, or a lot of it is what we call practice-led. So it might be like on, studying or drawing comics, production of animation, fashion design, as well as things like communication, performing arts, and all these kind of different areas within the arts and humanities. In addition to Intellect, we also own Hammer-On Press. So they're basically a small independent company too, and they focus on activism. And as you can imagine, they've been very vocal over the past couple of years. So Intellect is an independent company, and we don't really have any shareholders, but we are partnered with the University of Chicago Press. And all of our content is peer reviewed, and I'll talk about peer review a little bit later on as well, or during this. So we publish 108 different journals. So they come out between 2 and 3 times a year, and they're all peer reviewed, as I said, and they all focus on aspects of the arts and humanities. We also publish about 100 books a year. Most of these books are academic monographs and also edited collections. So we don't really publish textbooks. We tend to focus on the journals and also on sort of research monographs and anthologies and edited collections. So one of the questions I often get is, when should I start publishing? And the answer to that is now, or certainly try to start publishing as soon as possible. And this is where we come across one of those first mythologies associated with publishing. Many people, when I'm doing workshops or I'm attending conferences or generally discussing things with people, they often think that they can't publish until they have a PhD, or that you need to have an academic position at a university before you can get published in a journal or to submit an academic monograph. This, of course, is definitely not the case. And if you get through that mythology, you're already going to be ahead of the game. So I want to give you a few tips about the first steps and some top tips about publishing in general. and some opportunities. But first of all, I want to acknowledge a few realities. So since the pandemic, book publishing has been hammered. The market is not as buoyant as it once was, and we've seen some big changes within the industry. So being aware of that is, again, a good first step in the production and publishing process. Pardon me. Everyone hear me okay? Everything going all right? Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so just a couple of things about the market, things to remember at the moment that are worth considering. So we obviously lost all the retail outlets for the best part of a year, and that's been a big impact on physical book sales. And also libraries were closed, and academic institutions, their budgets have been massively hit. So library sales have reduced, and physical book sales have reduced. Conversely, we've seen an increase in digital sales and in addition, digital production. So now we're seeing a lot more ebooks being produced and a lot more ebooks being sold. So that's something worth considering when you're looking at choosing a publisher, bearing in mind that most content, academic content, is now being consumed online, especially through academic libraries. Another thing is there's been a huge backlog in terms of production. So we're very much behind because a lot of our partners have either gone bust, or of course, there's been major delays in printing and in sort of, logistics and materials and things like that. So everything's a bit behind at the moment. We're still playing catch up. That's definitely for sure. And then the other thing is, academic publishers and peer-reviewed journals rely exactly on that, on peer review, and with people being at home with kids and things like that, the peer review process is taking a lot longer too. So there's a lot of delays. So when you're going in to approach a publisher or a journal, that's just something to be aware of, that it's a difficult time, but one with a lot of new and interesting opportunities, and some of those I will discuss too. Okay, so kind of one of the first things I want to get into here is choosing a publisher or a publication, if it was a journal, for example. And bear in mind what I've just said, choosing the right publication or publisher is now more important than ever. So I just want to discuss a few things about how you might choose the right kind of publisher or publication for your specific research. Okay. Just a couple of questions coming in. Okay, gotcha. Just got a comment coming in there. Basically, people who are reviewing and working on peer review processes are having a tricky time, and that's definitely something that we've seen across the board with all of my editors. But right, so let's get back to publishers. So the first question for many is, should I publish with a university press or with a commercial press? And there's definitely pros and cons for both of these. And just in general, there's pros and cons of working with each publisher, because most of the major ones, they have quirks, they have their own practices, certain focus on certain things. And that's why it's very important to choose the right one and to do your due diligence. So would your project be better suited to a commercial publisher or university press is one of the things that you should consider. But you should also consider that university presses have indeed changed. They operate much more like commercial presses now. They are also much more kind of at the hands of the market. So they're more worried about commercial imperatives and about how many copies things are going to sell. They have to deal with these questions, whereas before they had far more revenue coming from universities themselves. They were being supported by grants from universities, and also a lot of these presses used to be owned by that, by the university that, they have their moniker, the University of Chicago Press, for example. But now, quite a lot of these university presses have actually been divested by their universities, and they're now owned by commercial publishers. For example, Intellect we recently sold it, but we owned the University of Exeter Press. So you may think you're going with a prestigious old university press, but in fact, you're probably working with a commercial publisher anyway. So don't get too caught up in chasing a university press when a commercial press might be the most appropriate for your project. Now, I know you're all academics, but you really do need to research the options available to you. And this might sound obvious, but really have a good look at websites and catalogs. Who's currently publishing what? What are the trends? What kinds of books are people looking to put in their catalogs over the next couple of years? Will your book fit into an existing book series? If you're working on a certain, film project or something, you may want to look around and see whether Routledge or Oxford University Press or Intellect has a book series where they might be looking to, increase the books that are in that series. So have a look at series, have a look at catalogs. Another thing you might want to consider is, if your work is a dissertation, will the publisher you choose, will they accept a developed dissertation? Will they publish anthologies? Are they only interested in textbooks? So have a good look before you reach out to any editors or before you submit any work, to make sure that, the publisher you're interested in actually is going to publish that kind of research. If you have colleagues who have been published, really ask them for their recommendations, because as I say, each publishing company has its pros and its cons. So it's good to know what they might be before you, engage in that conversation. So do ask your published colleagues. And another thing is do look on the website and see if there are any editors, if there's, who's working in your field, and try and reach out to the appropriate editor just to discuss what they're looking for, what they see trends being, whether your project fits into an existing series. These kind of questions that I've highlighted, it's definitely worth reaching out and speaking to an editor before you ever submit any proposal, and make sure you're finding out who's working on what. Another thing, it's a bit difficult in light of the pandemic, but attending conferences is a really great way to meet with editors and to meet with different publishers, and also with editors of journals. There's lots and lots of these conferences taking place virtually at the moment, and I really would recommend that you try to join as many as you can. At the moment, a lot of these conferences are free, and they just give you such a good opportunity to see what's going on in the academic community, but also what publishers are looking to what they're looking to publish, what journals are focusing on specific themes and things like that. So I really would recommend that you try and attend conferences and events, and speak to publishing companies and with journal editors whenever possible. A couple of things you need to definitely double check as well before you when you attend a conference, actually, I should say, it's always really good if you speak to the conference organizers to see what publishers are attending, and maybe you can try and arrange a meeting with a specific editor or with a publishing company prior to the event, so when you get there, you're kind of ahead of the game again. The other thing, you've got to really ensure that the press is reputable. There are many vanity or predatory presses out there, and you need to be really sure that they have adequate quality control measures in place. For example, do they have a robust peer review process? That's number one. But again, do they have a website? Are they internationally recognized? Do they have an international distribution network? Have a look on the websites or in the back of journals. Who's published with them previously? Do you recognize names of any of your colleagues? And then again, especially with things like journals, are they ranked, or are they listed on citation indexes and things of that nature? So there's a lot of checks and balances you can do. So it is important to do your due diligence, to attend events and to speak to different people, for example. Another thing that you need to really be sure of, again, is what's important for your particular project. So, don't just approach the big names that you've heard of, because it might take them 3 years to get your article to market, or they may not be able to afford to do color reproductions, or there might be lots of different things that are specific requirements. If you're writing about something which is highly relevant due to, say, political situations, or say the pandemic, for example, you might need that to be published within the next year. So finding a publisher who can move quickly will be very important, and if you need lots of color reproductions, again, you need a publisher who has an aesthetic and a designerly mentality. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming. Okay, so I've just got a question here. What about presses that are considered predatory because they're not affiliated with the university? That's kind of it's a very old school mentality. And as I say, a lot of commercial presses now own university presses, and a lot of university presses operate in the same way that commercial presses do. But when you're choosing a publisher, the first and foremost thing, I guess, that you need to check is, you need to go and speak to your department head, or the head of research, the dean of research, or someone who is going to give you a list of approved presses or approved journal publications. It's a bit of a murky world, because every country has a different way of ranking publishers, and every country has a different list of approved publishers based upon different facts. And you, of course, you need to ensure that your work is going to be internationally considered. It's going to be internationally recognized. Okay, so we've got Shimago's one free web. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, have a look in the chat. We've got a good little website there to check things up on. But do be careful, because it's for example, there's a lot of these ranking systems. The people who edit the systems and the people who decide on which publishers are reputable often work for publishers, or more importantly, they work for journals. And of course, they're going to ensure that their journal is kind of at the top of the list. So you need to check these things out with a pinch of salt. But we kind of have to deal with these processes there as best as we have. But I guess it goes back to that kind of like choosing the right publisher for your work, doing your due diligence, ensuring they have a robust peer review and quality control process. Again, do you recognize names? Do you recognize people who've published there? And again, making sure it's international, because most citation indexes and rankings, one of the requirements they'll have is peer review. Another requirement they'll have is that the company or the publication accepts work from international contributors, but also that they have an international distribution network. So within academia, these are, peer review and international are two very important sort of words to look for when coming to choosing a publisher. Okay, yeah. So if you're looking to get tenure, you're going to need to ensure that the publishing house or that the journal is tenure track. So I think the best thing you can do is to speak to your department, to your institutions, and find out who they work with, and that has to be one of the first and foremost things. But again, everything's changing, and commercial versus university press is very different than it used to be. And again, like, just because they're a university press doesn't mean that they're reputable or that they have a robust peer review. So you need to, go into that with open eyes, and you may well be better off with a commercial publisher, because most of us now operate at the highest levels of, quality control, because we have to, because we're not university presses, and therefore we kind of, we're starting on the back foot. Okay. So yeah, we've got. Okay. So does anyone have any questions about choosing a publisher, or does that kind of make sense? Does anyone want to ask anything about that now while we're on that subject?
Remember, you can also unmute yourself to ask a question.
Yeah, feel free. I'll just give it a minute in case anyone wants to jump in there.
Do you recommend publishing with open access journals or with more traditional non-open access journals?
Again, it kind of depends on what you need, really. And I think that's my key point, is making sure that you pursue the right publisher or publication for your project. Now, obviously, open access, I mean, ethically speaking, it's much better. But it's a really tricky world at the moment, because, somewhere at some point, someone has to pay. And publishers, support open access to some degree. Governments do, universities do, individuals pay. So it kind of depends on what you need for career development, and what you want to achieve. Like if you go open access, you're probably going to have higher citations, but you might. If it's just an online only publication, you may not, it may not be getting presented, it may not be getting marketed, it may not be, it may not be subscribed to by as many institutions. So it kind of, you can get more citations, but are they necessarily the ones you want? So again, it goes back to that pursuing what you really need for your own objectives. But also, so for example, at Intellect, all of our journals operate both green and gold open access, which means basically after a short embargo period, you can publish, or you can reuse, or you can host your paper in a repository via your university website or some other third party, or you or your institution can pay a small amount of article processing fees, and then it gets presented, marketed, produced, and distributed in the same way as all of our other papers, but it is then fully open access, which means it is freely available to anyone, anywhere, forever, basically, is it in a nutshell. So I think again, it's just being careful, finding the right publication for your work. And a lot of journals now are open access, or they at least offer you an open access pathway. So if you've got some research funds, you can go with the traditional or hybrid, sort of paywall publication, but you can still make your work open access. So again, it's like kind of doing that due diligence and seeing what's available. Yeah. Okay. I know. Oh, I actually, yeah, I know Lorna, for the editor of that journal. She works with us on a couple of publications too. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is if you're not going for tenure, or if you already have it, then you can kind of pursue cool and interesting projects and cool and interesting publications. But if you're sort of starting out on your academic career, or it might be important for you to get things published quickly. So finding a publisher who can do that, or finding a journal where it may not be the best journal in the world, may not have the best ranking, but they can publish it in a year, and based upon that, you then are going to get more publishing opportunities. So it's just kind of working out what you need and where you are in your career. But especially if you're starting out, it might not be best just going after a Routledge, Taylor and Francis, or Bloomsbury or Oxford University Press, just because the name. You may have to pay higher article processing fees if you wanted to go open access with companies like that, or they may not be, there may be a big huge backlog of publishing output. So you might it might take a long time for them to get that work out, or they're gonna, I'm going to go through a few things now actually that will be relevant to this. But whoever you go with, you want to ensure that you have a contract, and that will be the same with a journal, some kind of agreement in place, just to stipulate who's responsible for what. I'm just going to go through a few things which are really important to look for, because contracts have become more complicated, and I'm going to kind of answer the questions that are coming in through some of these comments that I'm going to be making. So first and foremost, be very careful what you sign. You'll be very surprised the amount of people who will come back and be like, I never signed that. And you're like, yeah, you did. So you want to have a very thorough look through it. And let's be honest, unless you're a contract lawyer, contracts are often filled with jargon. So if you can get someone to check it over, especially if like a friend or partner or something, has got experience with contract and contract law, definitely get them to look it over. But there's some things that you want to look out for. So yeah, don't just run in and sign things sort of blindly. Make sure you, again, do your due diligence. So some of the things that you're going to see in a contract is things like the royalty rate. So obviously you're doing all this work and you're getting it published. What are you going to get paid for it? And we all want to be paid for our labor. So finding out what the royalty rate is and on what. So often it will be on net, or it may be on gross. So knowing what you're going to get paid on all copies sold, or on after the publisher or whoever it is has broken even, or has taken their end. So make sure you know what you're getting paid. And what you often find now as well is, because a lot of academic books have very limited sales, and as I say, the market's not brilliant at the moment, a lot of publishers are saying, look, we can do this, but we can only do it if we don't offer a royalty until we've broken even. So maybe you've got to sell 300 copies before you see any pennies. So making sure you know what you're getting paid on and when and how. But that also can give you an opportunity to maybe negotiate, well, how about if I don't have a royalty, does that mean I can have more color images, or does that mean the RRP of the book can be reduced? And this is an area where we're negotiating a lot with individuals. So publishers, will offer you something up front, but it may well be worth kind of going back and negotiating with them when it comes to things like royalty. You're very unlikely in academic publishing to get offered an advance, but if you've got a good record, or if you've got a lot of citations, it's the kind of thing you can consider. And again, if your book truly does have wider appeal outside of the academic world, then maybe an advance is something that you can consider negotiating. But all financials will be in the contract, so make sure that you get them stipulated. Yes, so I've got a question here from Jeanette. Is it customary for writers contributing a chapter to only get a free copy of the book? Generally, yeah. And you know what? In this day and age, you may not even get a copy. You may just get a digital PDF version or an ebook. So that's something that will be in the contract. And if you are a contributor, or you're contributing to a journal, this will be stipulated somewhere, and it's again, it's like it's a bit of a slap in the face when you've written a book and you don't even get a free copy. But at the same time, if you've got an edited collection that's probably going to sell 300 copies, let's say it's not going to be a big hit. It's niche, and you've got 50 contributors. That's 50 copies of a very expensive book that we have to provide. So sometimes it's just not feasible financially for the publisher. But you want to be upfront and you want to know what you're getting and what you're getting into from the start. So these are all questions that you should have in mind. And I mean, you may not get a physical copy. Or the other thing is you might want to stipulate in the contract, well, I actually want 10 copies, and I need that for my own marketing. Or say if it's if you're working in Germany, you need a certain number of copies if you're publishing a dissertation with a publishing house. So there are certain stipulations you might have. And again, it goes back to choosing the right publisher for your requirements. But yeah, like making sure you get a copy. So that's the next thing on my list, actually. I was going to say is, will you receive any author copies? So it's definitely worth checking. Another thing that will probably be in the contract is embargo. Now, this is a word you see a lot these days. So is there an embargo period? And this goes back to the open access, generally speaking, but other factors too. So because a lot of work is going open access, now that a lot of work is open access, publishers or certain journals will stipulate that you cannot publish it anywhere else, or you can't make it open access for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or in some cases, I believe with MIT, it might be 5. So that can be really important. So it should be built into the contract. But again, that embargo could really hamper you. So say if you publish part of your dissertation as a journal article, and it's going, it's done really well, you get loads of citations for it, but that article basically forms the basis for one of your key chapters. You may not be able to republish that in your own monograph or in an edited collection or anywhere else for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that embargo might be. And that could mean, you completely miss the boat, or you can't get a book contract for, really important, research that you've created. So checking the embargo period and what that means is very important. So yeah, can you reuse and republish sections in another project? Most publishers or publications will have a certain percentage of work that they will publish if it's been published elsewhere first. So for example, if you've been working on a certain area for years, and it was originally a dissertation, you've published 3 or 4 articles, and then you've developed it, you've updated it. Not all publishers will want to publish that at all, and some they will stipulate that it needs to be at least 50% new material or 90% new material. So that's a question that you should have when approaching a publisher too. And again, it'll be something that's probably in the contract. Going back to peer review, that should be in the contract too. It should be stipulated in clearly what kind of peer review that is. Some people and some publishers, they will say that they're peer review, but what they mean is an editor like me is reading the manuscript and going, yeah, that's fine. But that's not what peer review should be. Peer review should be double blind, which means it's anonymous. So the author doesn't know who's reviewing and the reviewer doesn't know who the author is. Now, obviously, in the academic world, it's a little bit of a gray area because a lot of people, if it's specific and niche, will know who's who. And again, you can get people who are like, well, you haven't quoted me, you haven't referenced me, so that could be a problem too. But it is still the best quality control system we have, and it's an honor-based system, and generally speaking, it works very well. But you need to know what that peer review is and who's going to be peer reviewing the work to ensure that it counts for your tenure, or it counts for career development, or that in 5 years' time, when you've published a few more things, you don't look back and go, I really wish that was a peer-reviewed publication, because I've wasted a great paper on what isn't a great publication. Okay, yeah. We do get a lot of reviewer too. Basically, we do get a lot of people who they'll have a certain group of people who they like to use, and if you don't use them, maybe they'll be like, well, why haven't you used John Hampshire or whatever it might be. So it's worth bearing that in mind, but it is still the best system that we have. Okay. I mean, again, with the contract, can you get out of it? Like if things fall apart down the line, or if the company goes bust or something like that, which are all things that are occurring at the moment, can you get out of the contract, if they don't fulfill their terms? Now, in the arts and humanities, another thing which is often important to us is images and image rights. So normally, as a contributor or an author, you will be responsible for image rights. But again, if you choose the publisher for a project, perhaps they will, pay for the image rights, or perhaps they will clear things for you. Maybe they'll use their legal team, or maybe they have, access to Guggenheim or to Getty or something like that. So, if you need to use images, make sure you know who's responsible for the rights. And again, if you're working in comics or in something like that, popular culture, maybe you need some Disney images or Lucas Arts. These people will come after you regardless if you don't clear the images, and that's just kind of their policy. And they have entire legal teams dedicated to chasing down academics who have not referenced the use of the Little Mermaid or something. So it's important to know who is responsible and whether you will be legally held accountable. And again, are you going to have color images? You need to check this, and this should be in the contract too. Beware Viacom. That's a very good point. Yes, we've had trouble with Viacom. We've had cease and desist notices from Viacom before, but we did beat DC, which was a proud moment for me, when we definitely didn't do anything dodgy. But knowing who's got the rights is very important. But yeah, again, color. It might be important that you choose a publisher or publication that will allow for color. For example, Intellect journals. Each of our journals, printed or online, has color imagery, color images throughout generally, and then in the printed version about 8 pages. Now, a lot of journals will be printed on what I'll call Bible paper, very thin, no color images or no images at all. Now, if you're publishing on comics or something, you'll need to have access to imagery and to a decent, production process. But also, will this company, will they just do you a color section in the middle, like a classic, sort of academic book, or will they, employ color throughout? And if yours is image heavy, it might need to be colored throughout, but that of course increases production costs astronomically. So again, you need to discuss this at the forefront with your editor, whoever you're reaching out to, and be very clear in the proposal process too, what you require, so that you work with the right publisher. Again, how many copies are going to be printed, if they will print them at all? And increasingly now we're seeing publishers go online only. And we're seeing a lot of the big companies publishing through their own digital platforms. So a lot of these bigger, top 5 companies, they have spent millions and millions developing these, tailor-made platforms to deliver their content to predominantly university libraries, or now remotely. That could be a great way to publish, but you need to think of it as content now, and who's the audience and how are you going to target that audience. It doesn't need to be a traditional printed book, but if that's what you want, make sure they will actually print the thing. And will it be printed lithographically in a traditional printing press with plates and all the rest of it, or is it going to be print on demand? Or digital? And digital printing and print on demand have increased, the quality has increased dramatically, and in a lot of contexts you can't really tell the difference. And again, if you don't have images, it doesn't really matter. But if the first 200 copies of your book, or the first 1,000 copies that are printed, are done lithographically and in full color, and then you need to check that that's how they'll reproduce the rest of them. So when you sell out, and it gets reprinted, are they just going to put it through a POD Lightning Source or through Amazon CreateSpace? And then effectively it's like a printer, like you just have at home, and that beautiful full color lithographically produced book now is not being accessed the same way. So these are things again that you need to check are in the contract and discuss and negotiate ahead of time. And again, now digital rights in terms like who's responsible. If a Chinese publisher comes and approaches you to republish the work in Mandarin, do you have the rights to deal with that, or is that the publisher's concern? Just being very clear about who has the rights to what and when you can reuse things if there are embargoes. These are all important. And again, will the publisher be pursuing open access, or is that something that you need? Because increasingly now, I think for the research excellence framework in the UK, and for a number of other international sort of academic credentials and qualifications and things, the work needs to be published open access for it to count. But at the moment, that can be green open access, which means it's available through a university repository rather than being a true open access, sort of, publication. So double checking that, and again, going back and doing your due diligence at the start, choosing the right publisher, and again, asking colleagues, but of course, whoever's in charge and whoever's going to promote you, who they perceive as being quality and whether it needs to be open access. Yes, okay, thanks for that. Green equals university. Gold. So you can Google this, and also I'm going to send you some links in the chat at the end of the presentation. And basically, Intellect's got loads of FAQs. You can download lots of PDFs and useful information, and it very clearly describes what the different terms of open access are. Gold generally means you pay. Yes, that's true. Yeah, so green doesn't necessarily it doesn't have to be a university repository. Often is, but yeah, it can be on one of these online platforms, or like academia.edu, or some people do things through LinkedIn, and all these different platforms are available now. And of course, open access can mean that your research has much wider influence and has much higher citations, so it can be much better. And of course, ethically speaking, open access is a great idea. It's at the moment, it's still, no one really wants to pay for it. So we work, in partnerships with universities. There's also things like Knowledge Unlatched. There's various companies like that you can look into. So for example, libraries operate as consortiums, and they go around and choose content from publishers that's either yet to be published or has already been published, and then they pay a certain amount so that the publisher makes it open access. We're doing a lot of that, and we're partnering with a lot of these organizations like Knowledge Unlatched, like OA Open, which is Oxford University's version 2. And again, if you're working in STEM, open access is going to be much more predominant than it is in the arts and humanities still. And a lot of that's to do with the fact that the arts and humanities are kind of still the ugly stepchild, and we don't get so much money thrown at us. So it's, there's less finance for open access, but there's a lot of opportunities through various different organizations out there now. So that's well worth checking into and seeing if there's a pot of gold at your university, perhaps. Let me just see what this question has got images here, sorry. Okay, yeah, so this is a question about image rights, and whether if you're on an image like Unsplash, the license allows you for that should be fine, but you just need to make sure that you do have the license to use it. And again, a lot of these licenses are dependent on the number of copies that are going to be produced and sold, or how if it's discerned to be a commercial project versus an academic one. So just make sure you attribute, definitely, and just be careful that you do have the rights to use it in a commercial project versus just in something that's like a dissertation versus something that's going to be published by a commercial business. So again, it's due diligence and just double checking everything. Okay. I just wanted to mention subvention and fees. It's an old thing, but more predominant than ever. A lot of publishers will ask you for a subvention or for fees. This is why it's really important to ensure that they're legitimate, that they're not predatory, and that they have robust peer review, international legit distribution, all of those things. Make sure they're not just basically robbing you or getting you to pay a load of money to publish, rather than provide you with a service for that extra money. So, for example, a subvention can be fine if it means that you're going to get a lot of color images and the book's going to be $10 versus $100. If you're getting something for it, the subvention can be great. Plus, you can approach different grants. You can approach a university. There's a lot of opportunities out there to get funding to go towards the cost of production, or to go towards things like an index, or to go towards things like extra images and stuff like that. But make sure, again, legitimate publisher. And what are you going to get for that money that you provide? Make sure that that's stipulated in the contract too. It's just a bit of a murky world, so be very careful, and focusing on the contract is definitely a good thing. It's also important to check if they have a global distribution. Who's the distributor? Will they have sales reps? These things will be in the contract too. Is someone going to visit bookshops and libraries and present your book? Are they going to produce a physical catalog, a digital catalog? Are they going to be reaching out to, targeting the right audience and the right segments within the market? These are all things that are very important to check. So make sure they've got, the right distribution channel. Basically, there's a lot more opportunities than ever, but with all those opportunities, there comes more pitfalls too. So it's just doing your due diligence. And as we're all kind of scholarly here, I'm sure you can know your ways around researching. Okay, so any questions there? And if not, I'm going to move on to discuss proposals briefly. Okay, just double check the chat quickly. Okay, lots of interesting stuff coming in the chat. So yeah, definitely have a look at that, guys. Okay. So back in the day, you would probably, you'd have a manuscript or big samples and, certainly a number of chapters. And then you would write this very, long proposal with a cover letter and all these things. These days, it's very different. Most publishers don't accept or want that anymore. Most of them don't want a proposal. Most of them will want will have an author questionnaire or something like that. I'll put my author questionnaire in the chat at the end, just so you can see the kinds of questions that people will be asking you. So make sure you develop a proposal that's tailored to your chosen publisher. I once got a proposal on a Bloomsbury proposal form. Obviously, that doesn't look great for you, and it's offensive to me, you know what I mean? But it's kind of, things like that happen. So again, treat it like a job application. If you apply for a job and there's spelling mistakes, or like you're applying for a job at, the University of Bournemouth, and you do it on a Texas University, like job application form, it's not going to look great for you, is it? So just be very careful and be very thorough. And I say don't send them off willy-nilly either. You can submit to more than one publisher at once when it comes to book proposals. You cannot do that with journals. With journals, you only submit to one journal at a time. But you can submit multiple proposals to multiple presses. And a bit of advice is I would inform each press of who you've submitted to, because it can speed things up, especially if they want the work. But it's also just kind of a polite thing to do. That's for sure. And as well as not just sending them off willy-nilly and making sure you're choosing the right publisher and that you've completed the appropriate form for that publisher, it's worth putting it in a drawer and sitting on it for a few days, getting a colleague to read through it. The amount of mistakes, the amount of rush proposals or half complete proposals that we get, it's astronomical. And we're probably publishing about 50% of the proposals we receive, and generally people do a really good job. So that's kind of showing you what you're up against there. So giving yourself the best chance by being very thorough and ticking all the boxes is very important. So what I would do as well is I'd speak to an editor such as myself at the press and find out exactly what they require before sending it in. Read all the available literature, the FAQs and the guidelines. Most publishers will have detailed information on their websites. Intellect does, for example. You can go to the Publish With Us section and you'll find a huge amount of information there. And again, very clear instructions on submission. And that's even more important with a journal, because with journals, you get any of these things wrong, and you may well end up in the bin, and that might be your one chance to break through the door. So it's very important that you are do your due diligence, and that you read through style guides diligently, and you read the FAQs and the guidelines. And as I say, most publishers should have all of that, and most editors should be willing to want to discuss this with you to ensure that you submit the right work at the right time. I've given you my Bloomsbury analogy, so fill in the right form. So Intellect has a specialized author questionnaire, but each publisher will have their own, and they will, some will be more interested in marketing, others will be more interested in certain other things. So make sure that you're doing the right thing. The other thing is like some publishers will offer you a contract subject to peer review based upon a proposal, whereas others will want, it's rare now, but others will want the full text, the complete manuscript before they will, consider publishing it elsewhere. Before they will consider publishing it. And that's another thing with a university press. Most still have an editorial board who are affiliated with the university. who will have to review the proposal before the publishing company can commit to publishing the work. So that can add quite a lot of delay, and it's a bit of an antiquated system, so it's just worth considering as well. But yeah, Intellect, we will offer you a contract based on your questionnaire. We will often ask for samples or a table of contents. We'll want you to very much complete very detailed aims and scope for the project as well. But we may offer a contract subject to peer review based on the questionnaire. So you don't even have to have finished the full manuscript, nor do you have to finish the manuscript before you can start looking for publishing opportunities and outlets. So do consider that when you're writing your dissertation, you can start shopping it around and looking for a publisher that you can, who will be interested in taking it on and developing it into a book project. Okay, be realistic about when you will submit the manuscript and what length it's going to be. This is often something we get. Oh, it's going to be 90,000 words, and then we get 130,000 words, and we're going to just say edit it. That's unless it's extremely relevant, and more often than not, short and succinct is better, right? But don't be truthful in the proposal about everything, but be realistic about when you're going to submit it and what length it will be. Another thing is try not to upsell too much. Be honest. Academic books are academic books, and even if they have crossover appeal and may appeal to more of a trade audience or a more general reader, that's fine, but they're unlikely to be up there with Agatha Christie and Harry Potter and all of those things. So don't waste time on trying to explain how it's going to be interesting to everyone when it clearly is quite a unique project on, I don't know, Colombian dance or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? So just be honest and don't upsell. It's very important to do a competitor analysis. So what I mean by that is highlight similar or competing books. Again, don't do this is a pitfall. Don't do the whole, no, my work's completely unique. There's nothing like it out there. That's rare. And also it means that we won't believe you. And then we'll have to go out and do our due diligence. And then we'll find 10 books which are similar, and then we it's going to create questions for us. But one of the other things is by doing that competitor analysis, we can then go and use various platforms that we have, and we can see how these things have sold, which again, in addition to your proposal, will give us a clearer idea of the kind of work that we are going to be dealing with. So, doing competitor analysis, having a look around, listing competing titles, these are all great things to do in a proposal. What you'll find now as well is that in these questionnaires and proposal forms is a lot of it is, it's about the market, it's about the audience. It's not just about the content itself. So do spend just as much time focusing on sales and marketing questions as you do on what your methodology is and what theoretical perspectives or constructs you're utilizing. So if you can provide market research, or if you've done a marketing plan, if the questions aren't actually there within the form for you to answer anyway, that's going to put you in good stead. So do think about market and audience, and be very clear when it comes to the audience. Knowing who your audience is and explaining that to us as editors is vitally important. Academic publishing is in the same financial crises as the rest of the academic world. So anything that you can do to give us some, one, we're going to think like, oh wow, you're going to be great to work with, but to show that you've considered these things and that you know who the book is going to be targeted to. It's very important. Again, thinking about length, a lot of publishers won't be interested in a book over 100,000 words if it's a monograph or an anthology edited collection. A lot of that's just simply to do with production costs, but also it's not like a dissertation for your colleagues and for your for whoever you're defending it against. It's supposed to be a succinct and insightful book project that's it reads differently. So do think about that. So keeping it short and succinct can be a good call. If you want color images, be aware that that'll add costs, and it will make it potentially a less attractive project for a lot of publishers. So think about that and be realistic, and be aware of that basically. But in light, again, mentioning subventions and grants, if you have access to a pot of money at your institution to go towards publishing, then that will be great if you can include that in the proposal, the author questionnaire, and that it shouldn't never be a prerequisite, but if the publisher is going to offer you they're going to expedite production, they're going to increase imagery, they're going to lower the the retail price, or they're going to make it straight to paperback, and they're going to give you extra, you're going to get more from the project, then it's worth considering, especially if your university or a grant body will award you some cash. Okay. Like I say, it's fine to shop the proposal around, but don't send it to everyone, and do your due diligence, pick the right publisher from the start, because it will expedite everything for you. Okay, so a word on dissertations. So dissertations and book publications are very different. They have very different purposes, as we know, and they have very different audiences. So publishers can be skeptical when it comes to publishing dissertations. So you want to allay their concerns and maybe go with a publisher who specializes in developing dissertations. So the objective is not to convince your supervisors that you can present a high level of research, to be the level of research that's required to be awarded a PhD, but rather to deliver a coherent and exciting book that is easy to read and persuasive, that will be attractive and marketable to the relevant audience. So here's a few tips. First of all, there's a lot of books that are worth reading out there. The famous one is published by the University of Chicago Press. It's literally called From Dissertation to Book, and that's by a guy called Germano. So the book From Dissertation to Book is kind of an industry standard. I'd recommend you have a read of that if you want to develop a dissertation into a monograph or book project. But there's a lot of other things out there. Also, publishers like Intellect will have a lot of information on their website. And again, if you're going to work with a publisher, you want to work with a good editor who knows and is comfortable how to help develop things like that. Okay. And what I'm seeing a lot of now as well is, if you can, write the dissertation as a book from the beginning. A lot of people are being told and persuaded by their supervisors to do this, and that's a change in academia. So if you can either write it from the get-go as a book, and then maybe add certain bits of evidence and things you need to for the dissertation, that's great. And I know a few people who write like 2 versions of each chapter, so that they can expedite the editing process, and they're looking to publish a book from the dissertation from the start, which is a different approach than was traditional, but now it's something that a lot of publishers are keen to do, is work on dissertations. And I think now that people are doing photo essays and more practical things and all kinds of stuff like that, there's a lot of options there as well. Okay. Yeah, I mean, things like you're going to be able to get rid of a methodology and a literary review. So there's a big chunk that you just won't need for a book. You're going to need a strong, short, succinct introduction and conclusion. Again, if you can get anyone to write you a foreword or anything like that, these are all great marketing tips that you can include in the proposal. Okay. Sounds obvious, but the tone is really important. If you don't be boring. Write the dissertation dynamically, and again, know how you're going to have to tweak the tone to make it more interesting as a book. It's going to be lots, not lots of, in this I plan to, here's my example of. It's you're going to assume that the reader knows more, and the tone is really important. Okay, if the book's going to be assigned as a text at undergraduate level, this is going to be very attractive. So seeing if you can get any ambassadors to kind of work on your behalf, and including that in a proposal is great. If you can get librarians to sort of commit to wanting to publish it, or if you can get senior colleagues to say that they will put it on a course, or that they feel it's really relevant, that kind of thing is going to be going to be really helpful as well. So thinking about how you can distinguish the project through the author questionnaire by thinking about marketing and getting people to upsell it for you rather than you doing it is important. Okay. Right, does anyone have any questions there? Because I know I've got like about 5 minutes left. Okay, how does having your, I've got a question here, sorry. Okay, how does having your dissertation open access impact chances for your proposal? Okay, so that's interesting. So a lot of publishers will say you should embargo your dissertation and only have it through like the repository as much as is required, or create it so that people can't download the full text, which will to some degree improve your chances when it comes to having a proposal accepted. That said, I don't agree with that. I like to see if parts of a project have been published in journals and you have citations, and you can show usage and circulation. For me, that's great. I can then see that there's going to be a market for a book. And again, if the dissertation, if it's got like 50,000 downloads, then that's going to make it more. It's going to be interesting for me to see a book develop from it. But again, if the dissertation is going to be very similar to the book and it's fully open access, there is that question: are people going to purchase it at all? But it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. Personally, you can maybe embargo some of it, or you can have it just like as a in a repository at a university or something like that, where people are going to access it, but it's unlikely to threaten potential sales. But these are very good questions, and these are things to definitely consider. Okay, yeah, so Intellect, we have an author fund, which is actually paid for by Intellect, but also by a lot of our authors who relinquish their royalties to put into a pot, which then goes to other authors. We actually, no problem. No problem. My pleasure to be here. And again, you can all email me if you do have any specific questions afterwards, because I know we're about to run out of time. Intellect Author Fund, we tend to apply it to different things ourselves. So we'll be like, oh, well, this maybe has very limited potential in terms of sales, but the research is really interesting and important. So we'll use the author fund to mitigate some of the risk. So it generally is kind of at our discretion, but if you wanted to apply for it, you can just email me. I'm just going to put that in the chat now. So here's my email address. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can simply drop me a line. And if you were interested in submitting anything, or you wanted to discuss about journals, then feel free to email me any ideas or any proposals you might have. I'm just going to also chuck in here. So have a good look at the Intellect website. It is full of great information and lots of really cool free stuff as well. But that's a link to the Publish With Us page. So that has information about publishing in our books or in our journals. You can obviously submit to propose a new journal. You can submit to propose a guest edited theme, theme special issue. But I guess one random top tip, especially if you haven't been published before, you should have a look at a journal that you're interested in, and you should reach out to the reviews editor, and you should offer to do a review for them, either of something interesting and cool that you've read, or a show, or whatever you've seen, or just say, hey, I want to put my name down. Do you have anything that's up for review? One, you're going to get a free book or something out of it, which is always cool. And two, they always need things being reviewed, even if it doesn't get published. And if you can work to a deadline and you can tick all these boxes, when it comes to submitting maybe an article later down the line, the editors and the editorial team are going to know who you are, and they're going to trust you to deliver. So doing a review of something is a great foot in the door, and also it's not really going to get reviewed in the same way, peer reviewed that is, as a full article. So again, it's not going to take you as long. It's not going to be as difficult to develop, and then you've got much less chance of it being rejected, because unfortunately with journals you are likely to have a lot of things rejected, or you're going to have to develop quite a lot of things. Look, guys, I know that's time. So does anyone have any questions? I mean, if we've got a few minutes to run over, I'm happy to answer anything that people might have now. So yeah, feel free to just to interrupt or to drop it in the chat. Okay, well, yeah, I know that's a lot of information to take in, and I know I was reeling it off at 1,000 miles an hour, but I hope some of that sticks, and I hope some of it's relevant. And when you've had a chance to look at the website and digest a few things, feel free to come to me with any questions. I know there's a lot to take in, and I know it sounds a bit scary, but generally speaking, it's well worth having a go, and it's well worth contacting people, reaching out, finding out more, and not being scared, to start the process. I mean, the sooner you start, the better, really. And, we're all desperate for content. So even though we have high rejection rates and things, we need it desperately. We need you. It's a mutually beneficial situation. So just do your due diligence. Try and remember some of the things I said, international peer review, not predatory, legitimate. Think about some of those things, and simply by looking at a website or reaching out to an editor like myself, again, you'll find all of our information on the website. And, if you don't have to think about just Intellect, if you're going to, the same with Bloomsbury or, Macmillan or Palgrave or Routledge or whoever else. And it's good to have a conversation with people, because you might not want to work with them. It can be a stuffy old boys, if you know what I mean. So there are dynamic, innovative, and interesting presses out there, and they're very respected and prestigious ones. And there's lots in the middle, and there's loads of crappy ones too. So do your due diligence and find the right home for your specific project. Well, it's been a pleasure. I thank you all for your time, and you've got my email in the chat, james@intellectbooks.com. So just drop me a line if you have any further queries, questions, or if you want to submit something.